Did y'all do the buzzer? I don't want to count anybody late if they hadn't heard the buzzer. All right. Well, I don't know about you, but I've really enjoyed Tanner's classes the last couple of weeks. Okay, he is in Miami today at an art show. So, wouldn't you, one, like to be in Miami on a day like today, and two, I don't have any artistic ability in my body at all. And so I have a great deal of appreciation, okay, for those people that do have art ability, and Tanner definitely does. He told me early on when I asked him to teach these couple of months that he would be off today, and I told him the last thing I wanted to do was to get into his lesson flow. Because he knows where he's going with his discussions on Proverbs and the way he's taking each of the topics and breaking them out. So our focus today is going to be on Solomon. I know all of us have different ideas of when I die and go to heaven, this is some of the questions I want to ask. Like one of the questions I want to ask. That's right. I'm getting there too. I'm happy. Yeah, because I'm thinking right now, one of the questions I want to ask is, how is it when you're working out in the yard that you can have 7 ants on you, but you don't know about it until they all decide to bite you or sting you at the same time? Okay. I mean, what's this coordinated effort among ants, okay, that I experience all through the spring and the summer? Now, I'm like Steve, once I get to heaven, I'm not going to have that question. And so what I'm getting ready to mention now is just my opinion, and when we get to heaven, we'll find out the facts. But if you look at the book of Proverbs and the way the verses are laid out, and sometimes they'll have 2 or 3 verses on the same topic, and then another topic, and then it'll pick up and it'll have another. I think about Solomon sitting on the throne, and each morning doing a morning thought. Do y'all have calendars where they have a morning thought, or a morning cartoon, or a morning theme? Okay. I almost think about Proverbs being put together by a scribe that was writing down each day that Solomon got on the throne and made his proverb. And therefore he took all the different proverbs. And then Solomon, of course, was a judge, and we hear where he heard cases, because you remember the case about the 2 ladies who had the infant children and one died during the night, and how he dealt with that. And you know how some of his cases might have affected how his thought process was that evening and what his proverb might be for the next day. So it'll be interesting to see how this all connected, but we do know that God's inspired word was through Proverbs, and we're having a chance to be able to understand more about what we're supposed to do by the wisdom that was provided to us through Solomon's words. So what do we know about Solomon? What? He had a lot of money. That's for sure. He's a wise man. What? David's son. All right. How many sons did David have? A lot. 19. 19 sons. All right. Was Solomon the oldest living son at the time that David died, and therefore the heir apparent to the throne? No, he was not. Was there a lot of animosity among the boys and rivalry among the boys on who was going to be the heir apparent once their dad, King David, passed away? Lots. Even to the point that David appointed appointed Solomon as a co-reigner. He was a co-king with David in the last years of his life, to the point that when David died, there would be no dispute and there would be no argument among the boys on who the designated heir was. All right, so then, once we see Solomon take over the throne, and he reigns for a total of 40 years, and he's been watching his dad carry on the kingship now for the last couple of years, and he has this opportunity from God where God's getting ready to give him a charge as to his kingship, and he gives Solomon a wish, for sake of another word. And what does Solomon do? He asks for wisdom. Now we know that God can't be surprised, right? Because he's omnipotent. He knows. But don't you know that God was surprised when you have a young man that's getting ready to take over this vast kingdom that his dad's provided to him, okay? And the one thing that he asks for is wisdom. So what does God do with this wish? He grants it to him, right? And because he was so selfless in his request, God gives him a double portion. He gives him the riches and the power and the peace within his kingdom, okay? Isn't that astonishing? Isn't that the way a father likes to bestow gifts to their children? We want to be generous to our children, don't we? How many of us are still paying off Christmas debts? Okay, you know, when you put them on the credit card and they come due in January and February and March, okay? Why? Because we want to bestow gifts on those people that we love. How more so than God? God looks for every opportunity to be good to you, to be good for you, to be able to be part and parcel of your life. What keeps God from doing that on a regular basis with us? He wants to. Come on, guys.
What keeps God from doing it on a regular basis? We do. Because we don't talk to God enough. We don't ask Him or let Him know what's going on in our life.
We don't ask Him, right? Isn't that sad? We're talking about going to heaven and trying to find out things. Wouldn't it be sad to go to heaven and have a chance to sit down with God and God go, you know, back in 2024, when you were going through this challenge in your life, and you wouldn't kneel and ask me to help you? This is what I would have been willing to do. And then He opens up the vast storage of His ability, and we go, oh, then I didn't have to carry that burden alone. Oh, I didn't have to fret over this. I didn't have to worry over this. I didn't have to carry all these concerns alone if I had just done what? Cast them on Him, tell Him about them, trust Him about it, and leave it alone. Get out of the way. Let God do His work. He's vastly more capable of leading your life for tomorrow than you are leading your life for tomorrow. Why? Because He's had years of experience with multitudes of people. This is not His first rodeo, but it's your first rodeo, right? And sadly to say, it's your only rodeo. You know, we are, except for a couple, are mature, are older adults, okay? Like our age, okay? The sad thing about life is it gives us the test before it gives us the lesson. Doesn't it? Here's the test of life, and then from that test, we learn a lesson. Versus in school, the teacher teaches you a lesson, then they test you on it. Okay. So as we get older and we've had more life experiences, we're a lot smarter. Why? Because we've had lots of lessons and we've had lots of tests through the life. So aren't we better off by giving things over to Him early and letting Him carry the load? But let's pick back up with Solomon. One of the points that was made is he was a rich man. According to today's dollars, Solomon would be, make sure I get this right, he would have a net worth of approximately $2.1 trillion in today's dollars. Wow. What he got each year was 666 talents of gold, not including the revenues from merchants, traders, and all the Arab kings and the governors of the territories. So therefore, he was getting almost $150 billion a year in revenue. That's a lot. So the question is, why would a fellow that asked for wisdom and God gave him wisdom, he gets on the throne and he commands a great country, end up writing Ecclesiastes chapter 1? Ken, with your good teacher voice, will you read Ecclesiastes chapter 1, the whole chapter? It's not that long.
The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness, a man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has already been in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to come among those who come after. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, and a striving after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is but a striving after the wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow.
He had it all, right? $2.1 trillion.
I heard that number,
Yeah.
and I went on Google search.
Oh, then you've got the authority.
That's more money than the top 20 people
Wow.
Yeah,
in the world right now.
yeah,
More money than the top 20.
yeah.
Combined.
Combined, more than the top 20 net worths in the world combined is Solomon's wealth. Solomon has wisdom, but yet toward the end of his life, he writes Ecclesiastes chapter 1, and the rest of the book is just as depressing, saying that life is meaningless. This is vanity. Why would he have such despair? What went wrong? He started off so well. He had everything going for him. But yet at the end of his life, he writes a book of remorse.
At some point, he quit trusting in God and quit confiding in God. His relationship with God, he didn't continue to build on that.
That's right. He lost sight. Think of this. I'm going to say it's one word. Ego. What is ego? I want what I want. Okay? It's all about me. How other ways would you describe ego? Is ego only for the Bill Gates of the world?
Focusing on yourself more than others.
All right? Focusing on yourself more than others. I came across this, and I'm dying to say it out loud because I think once I do, you'll begin to see where I'm going with this. Ego. Edging God out. Wow. What does the devil want to do in your life? Edge God out. He's elbowing, right? If I can crowd your life with something else other than what you should be, then I'm going to be edging God out. That's what he did with Solomon. That's what he's doing with us. But let's look at Solomon for a little bit. Solomon's first task was to build the temple. Now, how much did he have to do with building the temple? Construction. It had already been laid out by his dad. It had already been designed. All the stones had been cut. All the timbers were there, and they were all sitting there on the edge of town. So what Solomon did was constructed the temple. Because remember, David was ready to do it, right? And God stopped him and says, no, I'm not going to let you build my temple. Why? Because you got blood on your hands. Okay. And I'm going to leave it for your heir to be done. And then David, wanting to do whatever he can do. Remember, David buys the threshing floor. The threshing floor that he was going to do to be able to pay homage to God after the death of his firstborn with Bathsheba. Remember the guy that was on the threshing floor and David approached him and says, I want to buy that threshing floor from you? And the guy says, you're the king, I'll give it to you. I'll give you my oxen that are threshing so you can kill them. I'll give you the yoke that you can make the altar. And what does David tell this guy that's willing to give him everything that he wanted to be able to do this? I will not sacrifice to the Lord that which costs me nothing. Wow. What if we had that motto today? Most of us in 2024 try to get through our Christian life on how little can I do to get past. And if I'm freeloading on somebody else, then that's okay too. Why? Because it still gets me there. What if we all had the motto, I'm not going to come to the Landmark Church of Christ and take something away if I'm not giving something more in return? What if we were more givers and less takers? How much more would we be able to do if everybody was championing the cause and doing, quote unquote, more than their fair share? But that's where David found himself. And so the same threshing floor that he's buying at this time is where the temple's going to be set years later. But he's got everything already designed, everything, the stones are already cut, it's ready to be implemented. After Solomon completes the temple, then he turns to building his house in his courtyard. And what we find is he spends twice as long, spends twice as much money, and it's twice the size of the temple. Do we see a shift? Do we see the devil edging God out? Is it subtle? Yeah. I mean, he's wanting to build it for himself, and that he does. What's one of the other first things that Solomon does? He marries Pharaoh's daughter. Egypt's always been one that's been a nemesis. And you never know when Egypt's going to come up and want to lay claim to the lands. Solomon, the wise man, right? He's going to marry Pharaoh's daughter, because after all, then Pharaoh wouldn't hurt his son-in-law, would he? What did God tell him about marrying outside the family? Do not marry outside the faith. Do not marry outside the bloodline. Do not marry evil people. Why? And because he told them specifically, right? Because they'll corrupt you. He didn't say that they may corrupt you. They might corrupt you. There's a remote possibility that it might happen. He says, if you do, they will. Why? That's right. God knows us. He knows our weaknesses. He knows where we're vulnerable. So when God says, don't go there, don't do that, He's doing it for a reason. Why do you tell small children not to touch the hot stove? Is it because you want to deprive them? That you want to be mean? So what happens when they defy you and touch the hot stove? They get exactly what you told them they were going to get when they touched the hot stove, right? So were you trying to deprive them of something that they wanted? Or were you trying to keep them from harm? That's often the way we treat God, is we say, why are you being so narrow to me? Why are you being so demanding to me? Why are you being so constricted in regards to what I may or may not want to do? And the answer is, because I love you. And I know where that leads. I made the statement the last time I talked, I think here, God refers to us as sheep, and He refers to us as children, because you can see the analogs on both of those, can't you, in our lives? But this story is about my dog, okay? If I tell my dog at 5 o'clock, I'm going to put you up in the barn, because I know I'm getting ready to leave, and I know I'm not going to be back for 5 hours. I know the sun's going to go down, and I know it's going to get colder after it comes down. Does he know any of that? No. Does he care? No. Why? He's only interested in what he's interested in right now, and he knows that the sun is shining and it's warm outside. If I ask him what he wanted to do, and I gave him free will to do what he wanted to do, then he would stay right where he was, right? And then 5 hours later, he would be remorseful that I wasn't back and he wasn't in a warm place. Now, this is where we differ from my dog. We've got free will. We've got the ability to butt heads with God. We've got the ability to be defiant to God. We've got the ability to make our own decisions. And when we do that, we get what? We get the rewards of our efforts, right? Everybody says, how did that happen? And the answer is because we did it to ourselves. Oftentimes, God gets criticized for things that he has absolutely nothing to do with and is diametrically opposed to what took place. You see it borne out sometimes where you say, all right, these two young boys, stole a car. They drank underage. They raced the car, and they both died in the car wreck. And then somebody will say, well, how can God do that to two young men? That's the last thing in the world God wanted, right? That they would lose their life. But what did, in any of that food chain, any of those reactions, any of those decisions that were made, was God ever a part of it? So God gives us a chance to make our own decisions. He prays that we'll make the right decisions, but when we make the wrong decisions, the consequences are ours, not his. So let's keep going about Solomon and his life. What happens after he marries Pharaoh's daughter? That's right. He starts covering all of his bets. Oh, so you're an Amalekite, and so I'll marry somebody that's an Amalekite. Oh, you're over here, you're a Hittite. Okay, then I'll marry a Hittite. So therefore he winds up marrying somebody from every tribe around him, okay, in order to be able to do what? That's right, to try to keep everybody friendly, okay? And so therefore they won't attack me. But God had already promised him peace. He said, your dad, King David, had all kinds of battles, all of his life, and I'm going to allow you to have a peaceful reign. But he didn't take God at his word, did he? He was going to, quote unquote, do something for God that God couldn't do for himself. Hello. We're going to do something for God that God can't do for himself. We say that out loud, but it has no meaning at all, does it? If a God created the universe, okay, and he keeps all these galaxies. I mean, y'all read the news this week that they've now discovered a galaxy beyond the galaxies that may be 2,000 times larger than anything that they'd ever seen. Isn't that incredible? I always thought the Bible was wrong when it said to Abraham, you will have as many children as the sand on the seashore, comma, or the stars in the sky. And I thought, what's that? I can look up in the sky, and I can almost count the stars if you give enough time in a tablet, right? But I couldn't possibly count all the sand grains in the seashore. So God must be wrong. No, I was just short-sighted, right? I just couldn't see all the stars in the sky. He could, and he knew there were billions beyond anything that we were able to view. Why? Because they were so far out that even in light years, their light had not made it to the earth yet. Human beings have got a real bad case of the stupids, don't we? Because we always think we know everything, and God just chuckles every time we are so full of ourselves that we have figured it all out when He goes, and they don't know nothing yet. Why? Because He built it, and He gave it to us, and all we really know is what we know. And what we really know is just what's that little cocoon that's around us and our family and our community and our city and our state. Okay. But we don't know much beyond that. Why? Because that's all a human can do. That's all we've got the capability of knowing. That's the reason when we get to heaven, just think about it. John chapter 14, Jesus says, I'm leaving to prepare a place for you. And I will doubtlessly come again and bring you unto myself. Right. Now that's been over 2,000 years ago. Jesus was with God and the Holy Spirit when they created the earth in 6 days. Right? Okay. So if they can create the earth in 6 days, what do you think Jesus can do in 2,000 years? Just picture what heaven looks like. He tries to describe it to us by gold and silver and pearls and things of this type. Why? Because that's all we know. He's trying to dumb it down so we can understand it. But that's what He's doing, right? I mean, it's kind of a parable to us where we can kind of comprehend the glorious nature of heaven, okay, by just kind of dumbing it down to the point we can kind of figure out what it might look like. But when we get up there, it's going to be more than you could have ever possibly have imagined. And He's telling you that no matter what you're going through today and the perils of this life and the aches and pains of maturing, getting older, okay, that it's just going to pale in comparison. It's just, there's just, so don't sacrifice eternity for a temporal, short-term, quick-fix solution here on earth. We have a hard time with that, don't we? Going back to Solomon. Now he's hedged his bets. But he has an incredible appetite for sexuality. Okay. I think it's over 900, if I'm right here. He had a harem of 700 wives and 300 concubines. So 1,000. He was immersed in His glory. He surrounded himself with women. He took pleasure in whatever he wanted to take pleasure in, whenever he wanted to take pleasure in it. And then the wives start chipping away at him. I guess nagging would be a word. They were nagging him that they were living away from their homeland. And they were living away from their God, and they weren't able to go to their temple. So instead of converting them over his Jehovah, what does Solomon do? He builds their God a temple too. So he goes over on this mountain, he builds a sacrifice temple here. He goes over on this mountain, he builds a sacrifice temple there. And all of a sudden, Jerusalem's surrounded by pagan temples, all of them bought and paid for by Solomon, and the riches that God had given him, okay, at a total disregard for his allegiance to God. Now, what do we know about God? Loving. Loving. Yep.
He's leading people away from God, basically.
He's loving. He's forgiving. He's patient. We like to stop right there, because those will all help us out. Why? Because we're always needing His love, we're always needing His patience, and we're always needing His forgiveness. Comma, but He's a jealous God. Does He have a right to be jealous? Absolutely. Because anything that takes you away from Him jeopardizes His relationship with you, and He wants a relationship with you. So He's jealous about your time. He's jealous about your attention. He's jealous about your commitments to other things, because He wants the relationship with you. And so that's what we're finding out here, is as Solomon is being edged away from God because of his extreme ego, he's beginning to spiral away from God. He's getting ready to just spiral into depression, okay, to the point that he writes Ecclesiastes as saying, fellas, I have been there, I have done that, and it's vanity. If somebody had come back from a trip and says, I've been there, I've done that, and don't go down this road, you have a tendency to want to follow their leadership, because you're getting ready to go down there and they're telling you, hey, this takes you way out of the way. It's not the right way to go. I don't care what your GPS tells you to do, or your Waze or whatever else. This is the better route. Why? Because I've been there. I'm a trucker. I go there regularly. Okay? This is the way to go. But yet you take their advice and you what? You set it aside, you disregard it, okay? And you want to, quote unquote, go it alone. Don't we do that? Anybody ever been lost while you're driving? All right. Now, guys, if you would listen to your wife, you'd be lost less often. All right, so I put my plug in, okay? All right. And you know why Waze and these other GPSs it's a feminine voice telling you the directions, okay? Because that's the way most guys get their directions, okay? But when you were lost and you were going the wrong direction, and let's assume that you were going the wrong direction for an hour, right? And then you realize, wait a second, I'm picking up Mississippi state lines and not Texas state lines. So therefore, when I pulled out, I maybe should have made a right instead of a left. Okay. Right. At what point were you lost? When you realized it, or when you made the left instead of the right? Yeah. Even though you didn't realize it, didn't preclude the fact you were lost, right? And that's the concern that you and I have as human beings. And that's the reason that we come to worship service every Sunday. That's the reason we study God's Word, and that's the reason we pray to Him, so we true up. We true up. During the week, we're in the forest. And what's the old proverbial? I can't see the forest for the trees. You can't see the forest for the trees. You're in the middle of day-to-day living. You're in the middle of working, cooking, cleaning, doing, okay? And that's the forest, and that's the trees. So we step out, and we get a redirection. We true up our compass so that on Monday we can go back into the forest. And we can better live a Christian life this next week because we trued up. All right, so you see Solomon spiraling out of control, spiraling, and what happens when Solomon dies? All right, we'll look at, I'm going to read 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 11. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. So shortly after his death, the kingdom is torn apart. 2 tribes, 10 tribes, 2 kings, and then they go downhill from there. The grandeur never to be seen again. The temple holds up, it's torn down once, built back, torn down a second time by the Romans, never to be rebuilt again. And what's sitting on Solomon's temple today is a mosque, okay, that was built there thousands of years ago. Okay. He loses everything he had because he neglected the commandments and the instructions of God. Same is true for us. Ken?
Part of that passage about God being a jealous God, he also says that the sins of the father will be passed generation to generation. And that's what you saw. What's going to happen to the kingdom of Israel is all those descendants of Solomon. The sword's never going to leave the house.
Yeah. And, you know, if you think about this, I mean, when it's passed down from generation to generation, and because of sins that you did are affecting your son and your grandson and your great-grandson and all the others down, I mean, how can God be a just God when he's punishing somebody that didn't have anything to do with it? And the answer is God's plural, okay? He's looking at the big picture, okay? And yes, what you do in your life today affects your children. And how it affects your children is going to affect your grandchildren, and on and on and on. That's the reason all through the Old Testament, when the children of Israel would get punished, they were typically punished for 4 generations. Then, about the end of the 4th generation, they finally sober up and they get repentant, and God hears their prayers, and then he restores them. And guess what? The cycle repeats itself. It's typically about 4 generations from the time he restores them to the time he sends them back out into captivity again. Because it takes about that long for the father that repented to fail to tell the son where they came from, who failed to tell the grandson where the grandfather came from, and by the 4th generation, he doesn't know anything about what took place. And so therefore, he repeats the sins of the generations before, and the cycle starts all over again. Isn't that sad? And we study history. But yet, the one thing you know about studying history is history repeats itself.
It's just like Samuel's 2 sons, he failed to teach his sons.
That's right.
Eli, the same thing, he failed to teach his sons. So that's why you get punished, because you failed to pass down God's teachings to each generation. If you don't pass them down, it's just going to...
But look at this. She picks us 2 examples, okay, of Eli and Samuel that didn't teach their sons. But you know they were busy doing God's work, right? You know, so they'll say, I didn't do my home life right because I was too busy doing God's work. Ink. Which comes first? Your home, your family. Teach them. You know, but oftentimes, yeah, you've heard it before, you know, where the preacher's kids, okay, you know, because they're so dedicated to the church, okay, they didn't do it at home. All right, but before we go, I got one last verse. What's it all matter? Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. Now, all has been heard. He's finishing up his statement. Here is the conclusion of the matter. I'm telling you, here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. No matter where you are in life, whether you're young, middle-aged, or older, and you have these questions about what am I doing, what's my purpose, where am I going, what am I accomplishing, all the things that we doubt ourselves about. And the answer is, no matter where you are in life, it doesn't matter. The same thing is true today as it was true then. What is the whole purpose of man? Fear God and keep His commandments. 72 or 22? Fear God and keep His commandments, because that's the duty of mankind. Rich man, poor man, woman, all mankind. That's our duty. Fear God and keep His commandments. So that's our goal for this week. Thank you.